Welcome back to the EdTech Podcast, where we explore the ideas shaping the future of learning. Today, we're diving into one of the biggest shifts education has ever faced, the rise of generative artificial intelligence as a learning companion. Since the launch of ChatGPT, schools and universities have been reacting in every direction. Some blocking AI entirely, others racing ahead with new innovative models of teaching and learning. But the real question for all of us is this: how do we harness AI to empower every learner, not just the privileged few? How do we use it to enhance, not replace, the human side of education? We'll be unpacking how AI tools like ChatGPT are being built with pedagogical principles, deployed across entire national systems like Estonia, and designed to support teachers, not remove them. We'll also explore how global access is expanding from Oxford University to low-cost tiers in 98 countries, and training programs reaching learners all the way across India. This isn't about robots teaching children. It's about creating equitable access to intelligence, freeing up teachers' time for creativity and connection, and giving every student a mentor who speaks their language and understands their goals. Let's jump in. So, welcome, Jayna, to the EdTech Podcast. It's absolutely fantastic to have you with us, not only as a woman leading what an incredible company, but a mission that is so driven by future thinking. So, before we kind of get to what's going to the nitty gritty of the big picture here, I'd love you to be able to give everyone a little bit of background, not only on yourself, but about your role at OpenAI and what the current focus is on education as the EdTech Podcast, but also around the kind of research space.
Thanks, Philippa. It's really nice to be here. Thank you for having me. Yes, I'll start with a bit of an introduction. So I'm Jayna. I am our international education lead at OpenAI. And what that means is I work with universities, schools, governments all over the world to support the responsible adoption of AI and specifically ChatGPT. And I've had, I think, an interesting journey into education here. We are a kind of fairly big team now internationally, but I joined OpenAI back in January 2024, and it was a tiny office. And really, we had just started thinking about properly supporting education as a focus. And that's because we saw when we first launched ChatGPT that one of the number one use cases was learning, and the biggest user group were students. And that's the case in every region and every demographic. People were really using ChatGPT already for learning. So I think we just knew from that day that we had to build something to really support teachers, students, researchers, staff, and to do that in a very kind of collaborative way that was kind of co-designed with the experts, with parents, with teachers. And so it's been really an amazing journey since then. I think that it's been especially, I think, exciting to see how much we've grown from kind of working with individual institutions, universities, all the way through now to working with entire countries and seeing the kind of ambition that really amazing teachers and students have to kind of transform the education system. And as you said, put critical thinking, put personalized learning back at the center of it. So I think it's really I've just been lucky to find myself here while all of this amazing work is happening.
Absolutely. I mean, you just literally said Jan 2024. What a whirlwind that must have been. I mean, I can imagine that the buzz in your office and workspace must have been incredible to work within.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, I had a few different things I was doing before OpenAI, and that kind of led me, I think, to being one of the early people in that office. But I think if I kind of try and trace it back and join the dots looking backwards, I definitely have always found that being curious and kind of this love of learning has driven a lot of the things I've done, and had this idea in my mind that I wanted to do something really meaningful and kind of impactful. And so I studied history and was interested in kind of these big ideas. Like I was looking at kind of the history of ideas and sort of big trends, sort of philosophical trends, and then completely pivoted, mainly because I needed to pay rent in London and went off to work in investment banking, where I think I had a good sort of solid foundation of kind of the things that really power the world and kind of power economies, and saw really in that time that tech was really becoming a really big force for change. And so left banking, went and joined a fintech startup, and then founded my own startup, kind of supporting technical founders with, how to stand up, kind of go to market. And I just saw really in that year prior to joining OpenAI that everything was shifting since ChatGPT had launched. It felt like a moment where people realized there was this accessible entry point into AI, and no longer was it this domain of really technical researchers or experts, but actually became something that anyone could interact with and anything could happen. And so I just found that through all of that work with startups that I wanted to kind of be at the center of it. And so when OpenAI saw they were opening their London office, I thought, well, I have to be there and I have to kind of be part of it.
That is amazing. What a phenomenal journey. And just sprung to mind what an incredible role model you are for startups, for people within EdTech who, as you just said, it's so accessible. It's really tangible now to be able to imagine yourself being a creator of something and really being able to kind of maybe take an idea that in essence originally when you first thought of it probably was so far removed from possibility to now being in a position where we have got this at our fingertips, haven't we now?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there's been obviously now so many AI tools that are popping up in education, and there's ed techs, and everyone is now talking about this topic. But I think that maybe something unique that OpenAI can still bring is the fact that we are still a research-led company, mainly made up of machine learning researchers. There's like a library in our San Francisco office on every floor. And that means that a lot of this work we're doing in education has really been focused, I think, a bit less on these tools, but a bit more on taking a really research-driven approach and thinking about sort of learning outcomes. And that's kind of informs a lot of our work. So thinking through kind of what we're doing in the team, for us, it's been about how do we find ourselves in a world where everyone has this equitable access to intelligence, everyone has a tutor in their pocket, and what does that then mean for the role of teachers now that they're kind of no longer having to stand up and dictate from textbooks, or maybe their time is freed up from some of the admin that they might face, and they kind of get to reimagine the classroom with us. And so that's definitely been an exciting journey we've started, and obviously we have a long way to go.
If we go back to kind of the OpenAI as a concept itself, I feel like it's really reassuring as an educator as well that it's really grounded within that research and within that, honest, ethical stance on things. And we will come into that a little bit later. But so one question, OpenAI became a household name literally overnight. I mean, every single person was either fearing it or embracing it and just not really knowing what to do. I guess, we've spoken a little bit about accessibility and inclusion and leveling that playing field, but really, what does that mean for OpenAI? So if we come back to kind of those education points.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll maybe give an example here of Oxford, who are one of our first big university partnerships, because I think what we're doing with them really speaks to what we're trying to achieve. And I think that kind of goes back to some of the things you were sharing around making learning really personal, accessible, scalable, and going back to that point around equity of access. So I think with Oxford, what we really try to do is achieve those things through this kind of co-design partnership, where for us, what we're looking to do is primarily provide access to a world-class learning platform that is useful for everyone. So you go to Oxford, you get your email address, you get your ChatGPT account, whether you are a staff member or a brand new student, or you are a quantum physics researcher, you are able to use that account, and you have the controls around it. You have data privacy and security protections. You have additional functionality. So for us, I think it's really grounded on that. And I think what we're then hoping to do with stories like Oxford and other universities we work with is just to amplify what's working and what isn't working. We are building this general purpose technology. We think it has this amazing capability to learn and to support pedagogy. But I think that we will only find those answers and only advance this in the world if we are also sharing some of the stories of what faculty at Oxford are doing, or what we're hearing as amazing classroom experiences that are being designed, or results when we've kind of done some of this work and look back in a year's time and seen what impact has it actually had on a classroom. So I think that's kind of the partnership we're hoping to expand out across as much of the world as possible. And we've started with working with obviously some of these lighthouse institutions. Oxford is one, ministries of education across various countries are another, driven kind of by that goal.
That is amazing. And I think data privacy, things like that you've mentioned, it's like all in one ecosystem. It's so simplified. You're not allowing people to potentially get off on a tangent where data may be an issue and they may put things into it and put themselves at risk. So even down to governance and faculty members, just knowing that that's kind of a secure element in there. I wondered if you could just go a little bit into detail around that co-design approach, because I'm sure there'll be universities and people listening thinking, well, this is amazing. I wonder whether we could partner or look at some of these examples and find out more. But how does that co-design work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll talk to sort of how that works in ChatGPT itself. And then I think we also extend that co-design approach out to just how we work with institutions like Oxford and how we take this sort of institution-driven approach. So I think what we're doing at OpenAI is not kind of building a very specific edtech tool or a fairly inflexible set of tools where we've kind of designed them all ourselves and then kind of release them out in the world. I think what we're trying to do more is create something which are a sort of set of building blocks that teachers, that students, researchers can build themselves without any technical capabilities and a sort of all low code. So to give you an example of a very common student use case, for example, we sit down a lot of the time in rooms with students and we're listening to what they're doing. They're not all cheating with ChatGPT. And one of the most common use cases is asking ChatGPT to sort of coach them or be a kind of thought partner. So there's a great student that we met who's studying medicine, and she was practicing for her kind of final medical exams where you have to simulate different types of roles, so simulating different patient personas, and she was using the voice mode on ChatGPT to have this back and forth practice. And so I think that's kind of a use case that we'd listen to as an education team, as a company, and then realize, okay, that's actually very generalizable. That's something we want to share out with students across the world. And so that's kind of led now to that sort of use case being published and shared in 100 Chats book, which OpenAI recently produced, where we've tried to document some of these sort of amazing use cases that we hear from students and sort of share that with the world. And we'll sit down with students like that in listening groups, in focus groups, and start to understand sort of what are you finding useful there, what would be more useful. A lot of the feedback we get, for example, earlier on has been, we don't just speak English, we want to speak multiple other languages. And so now OpenAI covers like 97% of the world's internet population. So that's the kind of case where I think we're really co-designing the use cases together, and that's going back into product development. That also resulted in, for example, study mode, which has been a new form of ChatGPT where it's not just designed to give you the answer first, but it's designed to kind of act on pedagogical principles like the Socratic method, asking questions back to you, scaffolding, personalization. So I think we really design our products kind of listening to that feedback. And then to kind of take you through the co-design approach to how we actually work with these institutions. I think a lot of the time, teachers, leaders are trying to catch up with where students are and are coming to us saying, we have a pilot going on. We think that, there might be tools out there that are useful. We've got concerns, as you said, about data privacy. We don't understand quite how to approach this. And that's where we kind of come in and say, we're not going to give you all the answers. We don't actually have them. What we'd like to do is play a really key role in helping you figure that out and transitioning to an education system which is more AI native. And that is where we take a both top-down and bottom-up approach. So at the kind of top-down level, we might be helping build governance models, helping create AI guidelines, sharing examples of what it might mean to set an AI strategy at the very top. At a mid-level, it might be kind of that project management. So how do you set the right KPIs? How do you actually train hundreds of teachers in 1 year? How do you train 10,000 teachers? How do you train 100,000 teachers? We spend lots of time on that. And then also finally with that bottom-up approach, it's going back to sort of sitting in those rooms with students and just listening to what they have to say and taking that right back into the kind of research lab side of OpenAI.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's phenomenal, and just that breadth of things that have to be done. I really like the fact that you are very aware that there is not just one demographic here that needs that support. I think it's very easy, as edtech companies to assume that the learner is the only person that needs to learn about the platform, about what is used, how it's used. And as you said, things have come on so fast. And that reassurance for educators that, learning at the same pace as the students is actually okay, because these are all brand new things. It's not, you haven't had that luxury of time around it. And those perspectives will be really incredible. I think the 100 chats thing is phenomenal. And I think everybody should absolutely delve into that and read that. Apart from anything, again, just that mindset change of how are students using that, to give you an example, my son, I walked into his room and I heard him chatting away and assumed that he was on a call one day during the summer. It turns out that he was being coached by OpenAI on how to do his best next move on FIFA. And he was creating his super team because he basically ran out of ideas. He's been, playing FIFA for so many years now. And then he was going down, he was playing it, and then he was going back to it and having these negotiations with ChatGPT around this kind of like, oh, that didn't work. And you said this, and actually I did this. And just that whole moment there changed my perspective as well as a parent around that, it's not about cheating. It's not about getting it to do something for you. It's about those conversations that perhaps people don't want to necessarily have out loud yet because they're not confident in that idea or they're not confident in that situation. So I think the things that are going on here are phenomenal. And that inflexibility that you mentioned that you're moving away from allows that is the power of OpenAI, right? Is that it is just personalized because it can be anything and it can help anyone.
Yes. And I think often, I love that story you shared with your son. I think that's such a nice way to use AI when you need more ideas, you need someone to bounce ideas off. I think, the use cases are endless and it is sometimes overwhelming to sit down as a teacher or a staff member and think, okay, how do I begin identifying what's going to be useful? And I think to your point, the 100 chats has maybe gone a long way in sharing ideas and getting people started and hearing from their peers what they're doing. And as you said, we're doing this beyond students as well. And we've spent a lot of time trying to find those communities or create those communities with teachers as well, because there are some amazing things that teachers are doing too with ChatGPT and AI tools. And it's not all just about kind of saving time, creating lesson plans so that you can kind of be in front of a student. It's also things like completely redesigning classroom experiences, or as you said, using voice mode maybe as like another participant in a classroom. Like there's a great professor at ESCP in Paris who is working on a kind of feedback assistant where a bunch of students are going up and pitching a business idea, and then he's having ChatGPT kind of provide live feedback. And it's just these inventive ways that I think people are using it that we as a company are very interested in hearing about and sort of amplifying, and then kind of hearing also from teachers what we need to do next. The Academy, which we've launched recently, the OpenAI Academy, is one good place where a lot of that kind of work is hosted. Lots of sort of AI literacy resources, and also just hearing as well from teachers who are going through the trial and error of using AI and are sharing kind of their ideas with the world. That's been a great place where we've kind of found that community. But also I think we've seen that it kind of comes out in unexpected places in classrooms, or a lot of what we're doing is sort of building with sort of hackathons or kind of builder events, and people come out with all sorts of amazing ideas. And I think that is hopefully providing a bit of reassurance that this is still remaining as a very teacher-centric tool. And it's not sort of about putting AI first, it's about enhancing kind of human intelligence beyond anything artificial.
Absolutely. And I think that does come to something that is a really big concern of many people still. I remember having a conversation when I was doing some training once around just some of the basics around how to use OpenAI, and the real fear of, but if I tell it too much, it'll take my job. And actually, how are you kind of being able to deal with that kind of association that AI is job loss, AI is misinformation, it's going to hallucinate, it's going to do this, it's going to tell people something that's really, dangerous. How are you kind of navigating that side of things in terms of building that human element?
Yeah, I think definitely we hear those concerns, and I think our approach has been to just try and confront it head on. I think that for us, the way we've been thinking about how this is an assistant or a tool in a classroom is always something which is augmenting or assisting and accelerating learning, rather than replacing any human element to that. So all of these examples I think we've shared, or the things that we're seeing change classrooms, has very much actually allowed learning to remain very human, because now you have a tool that potentially has unlimited access to intelligence. You can really focus on the more human things, social skills, creativity, people connecting with each other in real life in a classroom, using AI as a kind of co-collaborator, as a thought partner, but not kind of the dominant mode of interacting in a school. So I think that for us, it's definitely been about engaging with that question and thinking about how we as a company can support and remove some of those misconceptions. One has been very much getting very hands-on, working with schools, working with universities directly, supporting them in their work. Another has been actually looking at some of the ways that we can ensure that AI does assist in the thinking process, and some of the early research we've done there, because we really obviously do believe that students shouldn't be using ChatGPT to outsource all work. And we think that there's huge potential for new jobs to be created too in this age of AI. And what we want to do is, I think, prepare the future workforce and the future generation to engage with these topics, and to have a strong foundation in AI literacy, so that they are prepped for this sort of new wave of jobs. I think once you understand as a student that you're talking to a large language model, you understand at a basic level what that means, you understand why it's giving you certain answers, either because you're coming to that knowledge yourself and using ChatGPT, or because you're doing it in a way that's been guided by your teacher, by your mom, your dad. I think that those are kind of the skills that will help set up students really well to go into the workforce and flourish.
Absolutely. And you just mentioned something really key there. You mentioned parents. When it comes to parents, and I guess a little bit around safety and responsibility, is there work that's being done around that? Obviously, not all parents may be using it. I mean, you mentioned 97% of the internet users are, so we probably are. However, how is that side of things being able to be supported as well?
Yes, 97% of the internet language population, so
Oh, there we go.
slightly different, but we're probably somewhere there. I can't believe we've reached like 800 billion people using it every week, so I'm sure a big
Incredible.
proportion of parents. But yeah, I think absolutely kind of helping guide like the safe, responsible use has been a very big part of what we're doing. And obviously we have all of these students using this tool, but a lot of my work and the team around me are actually working more with the kind of networks around them and stakeholders. So to give you an example, Estonia was the world's first country to announce this kind of countrywide deployment of ChatGPT in all 156 schools. And that was a really coordinated effort across teachers, now parents, increasingly the Ministry of Education, kind of pedagogical experts, a research team of cognitive neuroscientists, where we were really trying to answer these questions of, we know it's already here, we know that it's out there in schools and students are using it, but how do we take a really informed approach to grappling with this technology? And I think that the kind of work we've done with them really speaks to the role we want to play, where we see AI being increasingly used in a student setting. So for us, that's been a sort of dual focus of helping with upskilling everyone and bringing AI literacy to everyone. So it might be sitting down and doing sessions on kind of where is the technology going next. We've talked about how ChatGPT has a voice now, it can see, it can hear. So how do you kind of grapple with that and think about that in a sort of context of supporting kind of learning as a career coach, as a kind of office hours tutor for a student. But also I think we've been doing some of that kind of project planning work as well to identify what are the goals that we want to get out of this. A lot of parents obviously just want more guidance and more support when they're kind of confronting these tools. And a lot of governments also, I think, are looking at this and thinking, how do we actually enable people and kind of build this world that we're hoping for, where people do have equitable access to AI and have access to intelligence at a much better rate. We can really support teachers in getting rid of the time they're spending doing a lot of the more mundane things and getting in front of students. And I think our role is also to kind of help and be part of that work.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant because, again, I guess historically, when you look at edtech, and we can all say lots of things in hindsight, there's lots of tools and lots of new things and much more awareness around certain mental health and certain even just settings and access and restrictions and things. But it's really great to kind of hear that you're really driving this from the start. You know, you're not just leaving it till the last minute. It's not something that you're kind of putting to the side and reacting with. It's something that's really part of everything that you're doing, and that's brilliant. Again, when you were talking then, you said something about preparing students and interviews and kind of co-creating those experiences, I guess, for confidence, really. Tell us a little bit about how you're seeing students use ChatGPT for maybe their future lives.
All sorts of amazing ways that surprise me every day. I think that students are, from what I see, using ChatGPT as this kind of lifelong companion, that maybe they've started off with an assistant that sort of knows who they are, how they like to learn. And then as they kind of move up through like a university education, or they're starting their first job, it's then really starting to prepare them for this working world. And so careers and sort of career coaching has been one big one, which I'm actually so jealous of, because going back to being at university, doing a history degree and having no idea what I wanted to do, if I had access to a kind of endlessly patient assistant that would just be able to help me with, writing cover letters and practicing for my interviews, and could just surface everything I needed to know about a company I was about to go interview for, I just can't imagine how different the choices I would have made would have been. So that has been a big one. I think other ones have been a lot of students that we're seeing are very entrepreneurial and are not waiting until the end of university to start thinking about what they want to do. I think a lot of students we're seeing day to day now are building apps, running side businesses, kind of supporting themselves through an education. And one amazing thing about these AI tools is that it's really taken away that need to have this technical expertise. You can really get to fairly rapid prototyping of ideas fairly instantly with ChatGPT. So I know an amazing student who's running a sort of a kind of a coffee business, and sort of got these specialty flavors, and is kind of creating a little marketing campaign and running a sort of stand. And she doesn't have, a lawyer, she doesn't have an accountant, but ChatGPT is helping her with those steps. And obviously she's getting expert advice, but just the confidence it brings you to be able to just know that you can start somewhere and not from a blank page when you need answers to those questions, I think has been huge. And so I think we're definitely going to see a big change in how students are thinking about that kind of world, and the lower, or the barrier to that world has really been lowered. So I think students and that topic of entrepreneurship has been a really big one. And then the last has been a little bit more teacher driven. So teachers now who are using ChatGPT or a kind of AI assistant in the classroom are telling us that students are coming to the course week over week just way better prepared, way more engaged. Kind of the levels of discussion are a lot deeper because they're now engaging with this kind of office hours that they might access between like the hours of 3 and 5 a.m. To kind of get information on what's happening next, or to practice ahead of an assessment. And so we're really seeing it actually in many cases strengthen that student-teacher collaboration too.
That's really incredible. And I know I've seen many stories around how it has really allowed personalization for some of those really tricky concepts that students want to thrive at, but maybe the concepts they were released with in that lesson or within their time period didn't stick. And actually it's those sorts of things where you can really, really manage that. And I think the entrepreneurial side, I just had this flashback to in our sixth form, where when you were going into year 13, you're allowed to bid to be the tuck shop owners. And it's a far cry from, from the little window selling pot noodles in a sixth form centre. So that's absolutely, it's just incredible these days what is able to happen. And again, that really just goes to that equality of that, really opening doors for somebody who, as you say, we don't all have buckets of money or even time to be able to pull all those ideas together. And now that one little kind of spring of an idea, a spark, can become something really quite prolific. And what a great way to start your kind of lifelong journey as an entrepreneur. I think one of the things that I guess I hear a lot of is schools have blocked it, education systems have blocked it. Where would you sort of say, what would you say to schools or universities who are kind of on that borderline of we don't want it because, and it might be to do with those safeguards or those guardrails. What sorts of advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think we still see a bit of that, and I think very very empathetic to the concerns that people have, as we've talked about the misuse of AI or just the concerns around using it safely. I think that what we're trying to do when we speak to universities who are struggling with that is really first to sort of share that there are some amazing universities and schools out there who have managed to kind of overcome some of those concerns, because it's really been a collaborative effort to identify how best to support teachers and students. I think that when we're in those conversations, it's less about you really need to use AI because everyone else is using it, and if you don't, you'll miss out. And it's actually more about let's think to ourselves why students and teachers are returning to use this AI tool every single week, every single month. What is it that they're getting that maybe universities as institutions need to be aware of? And for us, what we're seeing is people are using it as a tutor. Teachers are finding it useful because it provides that sort of low technical barrier entry to building amazing new tools for a classroom or supporting a lot of the admin work that we know teachers are facing. Researchers are using it to massively accelerate the research process, and that's also why we started really engaging more meaningfully first with research institutes and kind of research intensive universities. And a lot of universities are really facing pressures around kind of being able to staff up and support admin teams. And obviously AI as a productivity, creativity tool can really assist with that. So I think it's kind of flipping it back around and thinking, as a university, what are you struggling with? What are the experiences you're hoping to bring? If their goals, and obviously they are to equip students to be better prepared for society, is to support teachers and provide teachers with access to these tools. I think it's there that we're kind of starting that conversation to say, let us kind of align with you on that goal, and then we can go into the whys of using AI. And I think one in particular big piece of advice that we try and share, and we point to the examples like Oxford or sort of the Italian university system, or Estonia, or California State University system, Harvard, institutions that have moved beyond a pilot, is to really say that the best and most effective engagement with AI doesn't come from a small lockdown pilot in one corner of an institution, but instead it needs to be this multi-layered approach where you need a strong voice at the top saying, we are going to make a change and we are going to invest in this. And these are the reasons that we're doing that. And they're very particular to us. And then there really does need to be that kind of both top down and bottom up support, where that is then matched by a proper staffed team who are looking at this. Teams who are looking at, for example, learning innovation or supporting teachers with new skills and continuous professional development, or supporting staff who are really strained right now for resources. I think it's matching that ambition with the right level of resources and investment on the institution side, so that they can then support all of this kind of grassroots use, which, as we point out to a lot of universities who have banned ChatGPT, is still happening, but in a slightly more fragmented way and in a way that no one really wants, which is where we aren't able to get that kind of data and insight. So I think that's kind of one of the big reasons we've decided to make a quite considered effort to start with this dedicated sort of secure version of ChatGPT, which is built for universities, built for schools, which comes with a different set of data protections, legal protections, and also really comes with this level of support and access to kind of these resources and this sort of change management framework that has only recently started to emerge in the last year.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I think that kind of really draws into that. I was going to be next asking you kind of, where do we begin? Well, really, I feel like it's identifying what are you going to be using it for? What is your purpose? But also looking at that angle of, instead of everybody having this fragmented workflow, as you say, actually that openness and honesty around how are we using it, being transparent, and let's try and build some really great practices through this. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I think we are really beyond the pilot. We really need to stop talking about pilots, because I see so many sort of 20, 30 people pilots that have a really limited set of use cases that are just not a good representative sample of what it could look like as a general purpose tool. And I think that it actually just hinders university in kind of being able to speed up and adopt this change in the same pace that the AI sector is evolving. So I think that really the kind of best way to start is to think big. And this is one of the best things I think about applying AI to education, is that when you think about the outcomes we can achieve, it's so much more than just productivity. It's so much more than just teachers saving 1 or 2 hours a week. You can really get very philosophical and think about what are the actual effects on learning outcomes, and especially some of the studies, the early studies we've seen where you start from a baseline and you look at the impact of, say, a personalized tutor over a concerted period of time. The gains can be really huge, especially if it's done in a targeted way, if it's done in a guided way. I think that's probably the more exciting part of where AI is going to benefit education, is to kind of augment that human intelligence. And I think that's definitely our hope. So I think encouraging people to think very big and very much beyond their specific team or department or use case, having that kind of governance framework at the top to set it out is really important. And then I think actually another great practice, which I've seen emerge from Oxford, ESCP, some of these other schools we've been working with, has really been about finding those AI enthusiasts and the innovators, because it's also from them that we're going to start learning how this is then scalable to the rest of, say, the teaching population. I think that we definitely recognize that people are intrinsically motivated to learn about AI, because nobody has time to sit there and learn about every new AI tool. And it's those people that we're very interested in connecting with, because they're usually the ones that are building incredible things with our coding agents, or they've started using our kind of video models to build new interesting kind of short informational sort of series. So I think that finding those groups and connecting them together has actually been a really impactful way of scaling AI adoption. So we call them faculty champion networks or builder networks, and they're kind of agnostic to any one AI company. They're really about convening a group of people together and just sharing ideas, sharing thoughts. We share with them also what's coming up in the next sort of 3-6 months. And we've kind of created that small cohort where those people are then the best people to go and meet teachers in a corridor or after a team meeting, and to say kind of, this is what I'm trying and this has worked for me, and to have that conversation rather than kind of OpenAI telling everyone what to do.
Absolutely. And it makes it more human. It brings it right back down to that personal touch of people sharing really good practice around what they do, which is what educators enjoy doing, is sharing what works and what's really thriving. I think it's really interesting. We've spoken a little bit about, Oxford, you've mentioned Harvard, we were talking about Estonia and Italy. How do you ensure that, these universities are so well resourced? How do you ensure that we do reach some of these emerging regions? So, for instance, I'm here in the Middle East, but also we've got Africa, Southeast Asia, where it does look very different. An abundance of incredible, as we've spoken about entrepreneurs before, coming out of Asia, an amazing amount of technology coming out of them, but also very much a disparity between the levels of education and the frequency even of education in some of those parts of the world.
Yeah, I think that's a really important topic, and actually very close to my heart, since my grandparents were teachers in East Africa. So I think really very, aligned to the mission of OpenAI, which is that we want AI to benefit everyone and not just the privileged few. I think that with this tool, that obviously there is a free version available, we are hoping that is one step toward making this equitably accessible for all. When we think about some of these initiatives we're doing, I think we're kind of well underway to making sure that these scale as broadly as possible. Last week, for example, the OpenAI Academy that I mentioned, we hosted our first event in Africa, actually at the University of Lagos in Nigeria, and brought together teachers, administrators, students, really to kind of share these ideas and sort of hear as well from that community what is working, very hands-on sessions about sort of AI ethics, responsible innovation, real world applications. And I think that that kind of partnership is really what we're hoping to see happen across the continent, also across as many regions as possible, because eventually one day we do see this as being a much bigger community where Oxford is learning what the University of Lagos is doing and they're kind of cross-sharing ideas. I think another one has been in our approach to some of those markets. So we launched ChatGPT Go, which is this new affordable subscription tier, which was recently rolled out to 98 countries. And also our work in India, which has been very education focused because of the big focus they have on education, where we've worked, for example, with the kind of national body to reach 10 million learners, making sure that state-funded institutions benefit first, and also kind of scaling that through quite hands-on work as well with teachers and schools. I think that we definitely find that if you're scaling this intentionally and you're thinking about inclusion from the beginning, that's probably the best way to address this potential equity gap that AI can cause. But I think that just seeing how it's already being used and adopted across so many different parts of the world, it's just made us, I think, even more keen to do this at scale as much as possible. Like, we don't have 10 people working with every single UK university. We actually just work across as many countries and regions as possible and serve that from a very small team. And that's great because that means that we can then start kind of cross-pollinating and sharing ideas, and also means that everyone is keeping up at the same time.
Absolutely. And I think also just leaning into that borderless society where we can all share and support and grow and develop together, which is just phenomenal. So I guess let's think about the future. When you're thinking about what is next, because I feel like everybody's probably still catching up and going, what? Don't do what's next. We're not ready. But what is next? For OpenAI, what's next Gen AI going to look like for us?
Well, reassuringly, hopefully, still the same mission, scale equity of access to intelligence, make sure that these tools are becoming useful, are becoming personalized, accessible. I think probably three big themes. So the first is that I think ChatGPT is becoming more of that sort of personal mentor. So as it gains more context about you, if you choose to share that, if you're choosing to share the kind of your personality, who you are, your preferences, it's starting to adapt to that a lot better. And we've seen that now with GPT-5, which is our latest flagship model we've released. I think that another one has really been the kind of agentic AI shift, which I know is a big buzzword, but really just means that rather than these text chatbots where you have one response in, one response out, we're actually just seeing more and more, and particularly this is in kind of operational efficiency use cases where you have a system that's capable of handling multiple tasks at the same time. And we've really seen that be very useful when you have a series of very repetitive workflows, creating a report, sort of chaining together multiple steps, like looking at a whole load of data and then producing analysis from that. That's where I think we've seen agents have been very useful. And I think hopefully that will continue, and we'll find brilliant use cases for it in education too, probably still to kind of help save people time, but I think also in a learning environment as well. And then I think the last one has been, how do we connect better to the ecosystem? So we've recently launched a whole bunch of integrations that are in ChatGPT, because we hear very much from universities, from schools that, yes, they're using an AI tool, but they're also obviously using a whole bunch of other tools and other systems, and they would like these to be able to speak to each other and connect together. And so, for example, now in ChatGPT, you can kind of go into it and say, look at my Google Drive or look at my SharePoint and give me my latest upcoming course, and then help me kind of generate a personalized quiz based on that. And actually, I'd like to learn a bit more about that topic. So I'm going to pull in the Coursera app and it's going to suggest some videos for me. So I think just a tool or a sort of a system that slightly understands your context a bit better, the systems you use, speaks to them. I think that's kind of where we're trying to build. And I think that will hopefully help this sort of situational context be much more present when you're using ChatGPT.
And that is phenomenal, because that's the dream. That's my dream. Interoperable systems for all, where we can really pull those resources and just actually really kind of understand all those different elements. I mean, it's a little bit like the way our brain works, right? We pull different things from different elements all the time, and we might have forgotten something, and then all of a sudden we have that click and that memory back to remembering that, oh gosh, that clicked with that, and then then it produces that sort of mindstorm of these amazing things happening. And I kind of feel like that is what you're describing there, are these different elements coming together to be able to create something. So I think for all schools out there thinking about the future classrooms, I'm not going to say a date because we could put a date on anything and we don't know, you guys closed the world down overnight with what you did. And so if we imagine the future, what do we think we need to get to the point where we have that equality, that access, those guardrails? Like, what are the steps that we need to be taking?
I think that it really does need to be more of a topic, like a headline topic where stakeholders like governments are talking about this, schools are leaning in and talking about this too. I think that this future is definitely not dominated by AI labs, but is hopefully really driven by teachers, by the kind of people within the system. And I think that if we can get all of those things right, and if we can have this much broader conversation about how do you put AI in a set of guardrails, how do you support the use of it when you're kind of giving it to students, or students are being directed to use AI or learn about AI, and also what are the right sort of governance frameworks and policies and sort of safe guidelines that we can use. I really think then the possibilities are endless. I mean, maybe there's a world where every learner has access to a personal mentor who speaks their language and understands their learning style. It's something as accessible as the internet, and it really hopefully frees up teachers' time just to have more time in front of students, thinking up brilliant ways of sharing knowledge, getting really creative, getting really hands-on. And, technology is definitely not at the forefront of that, but is one part of that and one tool in that classroom. I think it will obviously depend on different contexts. And as we've said, I think that the way that the West has been embracing it is different. I think our hope is this extends out as much as possible. But I think that really we need to prioritize things like responsible design. We need to think about equity and trust, because those, I think, the foundations where we'll be able to bring along educators and technologists kind of together.
I'm very proud as an educator that we've got edtech companies that are really embracing all of these different elements, but really thinking around that person and the whole development of their future and their life, as well as making sure it's research driven, and just really personalizing that experience for everyone. So I think, well done, hats off to you. And I'm really glad that you were able to share so much of that with the listeners today. Thank you so much for joining us on the EdTech podcast, Jayna.
Oh, thank you, Philippa. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to many more of these conversations and seeing where this goes next. And yeah, very, very glad to have had this opportunity to share a little bit about what we're doing, and obviously lots more exciting things to come as well next year.
Absolutely. And we will put lots of different information into the show notes about anywhere that they can gather research, anything about the book, the 100 chats, and lots of different details about how they can potentially collaborate with ChatGPT and OpenAI on all the different projects that you're doing. So thank you so much.
Great. Amazing. Thank you too.
What today's conversation makes crystal clear is this: the future of AI in education is not centered on technology, it's centered on people. AI won't replace teachers. It will remove the barriers that stop teachers from doing the work that matters most: building relationships, nurturing creativity, and cultivating curious, confident learners. We're also learning a key strategic lesson. Schools need to stop treating AI as a small side pilot. Transformational change requires secure systems, governance frameworks, and top-down leadership, a vision that puts equity first. So whether you're leading a university, a school, a ministry, or a classroom, this moment demands big thinking and responsible action. AI is already in the hands of our students. The question is whether our systems will be ready to guide us to use it. You'll find links in the show notes to new educational resources, research, and examples mentioned today, including the multilingual features, study mode, and the global inclusion initiatives we discussed. Thank you so much for listening and joining us today. If you enjoyed today's episode, share it with another educator, leader, or innovator who's ready to build the future with us. Until next time, I've been Philippa Wraithmel, and this is the EdTech Podcast. If you've enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to follow, rate, and share the EdTech Podcast wherever you're listening. It really helps us grow and reach more educators and innovators around the world. We'd also love to hear from you, your thoughts, questions, or even your own stories of change in education. You can leave us a voice note on SpeakPipe. The link is in the show notes. And we might even feature your message in an upcoming episode. And of course, you can find all our links and show notes and resources at theedtechpodcast.com.